Now, in the next lectures, we're gonna start talking about server-side attacks. I'm gonna teach you what a server is, and we're gonna talk about that in details. But before we jump into this, we need to have a computer or a machine that acts as a server so that we can try to hack into it. So similar to the way that we had a Windows machine to practice attacks that we can launch against normal users, we need to have another virtual machine that behaves like a server so that we can practice server-side attacks against it and see how we can hack into servers. So the machine that we're going to use is called Metasploitable, and it's a virtual machine that's built on Linux, and it contains a number of services that's typically used by servers. It also contains a number of web applications that act exactly like normal web applications and use the same technologies used by normal servers and normal web applications. So we're going to install this machine, and then in the future we're going to use it as a target to learn how to hack into servers and how to hack into websites. You can download this from the following link. Now I've also included this link in the resources of this lecture. If you click on this link, you'll get this page, and all you have to do is simply click on download to download it. I've already done that to save time. So if I go to my downloads directory in here, you will see that I have a zip archive in here called Metasploitable 2. And we know that this is an archive, a zip archive, because we can see the icon and we can see the file type. So in order to uncompress this, as we've seen before, we have to first double click it to access it. We're going to right click and copy. We're going to go back one directory and paste it here. On Linux, you'll have to right click it and click on extract here. And on Mac OS, you're going to have to double click it to uncompress it. We're going to give it some time to uncompress the contents of this file. And once this process is over, you'll see that you'll have a new directory in here with the contents of this virtual machine. To import it in VMware, we're going to double click VMware to open it. And we're going to click on Open a Virtual Machine. We're going to navigate to the location where we downloaded this virtual machine. So it's in my downloads. It's called Metasploitable2-Linux. And the only file that we can double click is this file called Metasploitable. We're going to open it. And perfect. As you can see, VMware added it there for us. You can click on Edit Virtual Machine Settings to edit its settings. The main thing you want to make sure is that it's connected to the NAT network, as you can see in here, the same NAT network that all of the other virtual machines are connected to. Once you're sure with that, we're going to click on Start to start it. We're going to say I copied it. This pop-up is asking us if we want to install the VMware tools for this machine. This is not necessary at all, especially for this machine. So we're going to click on Remind Me Later. And perfect. As you can see, this machine is installed now and ready to be used. Now it's asking us to log in. So the default username is msfadmin. And the default password is the same, msfadmin as well. But you'll notice when typing the password, you will not see the characters on screen. This is normal. It's a security feature to prevent people beside you from seeing the password. So simply type msfadmin and hit enter, and you should be allowed to log in. And that's pretty much it. Right now we have this virtual machine installed inside our own main operating system within our hacking lab, and we're going to use it as a target to practice a number of attacks. Don't be intimidated by the way this machine looks. We're actually not going to be using it much. We're only going to be using it as a target, and you'll know what I mean as we go through the course. So for now, our job is done. We managed to install a vulnerable server as a virtual machine so we can test server-side attacks and other attacks in the next lectures in this course. So the first thing we're going to look at is the server-side attacks. And again, these are the attacks that don't require user interaction. You can use these attacks with servers, so web servers and stuff like that. And you can also use it against normal computers that people use every day. The reason why I'm going to be using it against my Metasploitable, which runs Unix and which is more of a server than a normal personal computer, is because if your target uses a personal computer and if they're not on the same network as you, then even if you get their IP address is going to be behind the router. So they'll probably be connecting through a router. And therefore, if you use the IP to try and determine what operating systems run on it and what applications are installed, you will not get much useful information because you're only going to be getting information about the router and not about the person, because the person is hiding behind the router. Whereas when you're targeting a web server or a server in general, then the server will have an IP address, and that IP address, you can access it directly on the internet. So these ways of gathering information that we're going to look at now will work if the person is on the same network and if the person has a real IP. So if you can ping the person, even if it's a personal computer, if you can ping it, then you can run all of the attacks and all of the information gathering methods that we're going to explain now. In my example, I'm going to be targeting my Metasploitable machine here. So if I do ipconfig, or if I do ifconfig, you'll see that my IP is 10.20.14.204. And if I go to my Kali machine, I should be able to ping it. Now, if I can't ping it, then we won't be able to do anything. And as you can see, we're getting responses back from the machine. Therefore, we can try and test its security. So again, you can use these attacks and you can use these approaches against any computer that you can ping. So if it's a personal computer or if it's a server of any kind, as long as you can ping that direction or you can ping that person, then you can use these attacks and these methods that we're going to talk about in the server-side attacks. So it's going to work against websites, web servers, people, normal computers, as long as you can ping them. And just to convey this idea, now we see the Metasploitable machine right there. So it's just a normal machine. It's a normal virtual machine that I can use right here to do anything I want. I can list, I can even install a graphical interface, and then I'll be able to do just use it just the way I use my Kali machine. But at the same time, it has a web server. So if I try to navigate to it from here, you'll see that I actually have a web server here, and it has websites that I can actually read and browse. We're actually going to have a look on these websites and see how we can pen test them in the future. So everything is a computer. If you can ping that IP, you can use the server-side attacks. It mostly works against servers because servers always have real IPs. And also, if the person is in the same network as you, then you can ping them and you can do all of these attacks as well. Right, so the first step into the server-side attacks is information gathering. Information gathering is very important because it will show us the operating system of the target, the installed programs or the running services on the target, the ports associated with these services. Now, from these installed services, we can try and get into the system. We can do this by trying the default passwords, and we've seen this before in the network penetration testing part, where the iPad had a SSH service installed, which basically give you full access to the computer if the person still uses the default password, which was Alpine. So we can do this with any other service, and we'll see another example here today. Another thing that we can do is there's a lot of people install services and misconfigure them. So we'll have another example of this. A lot of these services are designed to give access to that computer, but they obviously need to have some security implementations. People often misconfigure these services, so we can take advantage of these misconfigurations and gain access to these computers. Some of them might even have backdoors, and we'll see an example of that. And a lot of them would have vulnerabilities, such as remote buffer overflows or code execution vulnerabilities that allow us to, again, gain full access to that computer. Now, the simplest way on doing this is something that we've seen before, which is using ZenMap. So we use ZenMap using the IP. We get a list of all of these services and then Google maybe each one of them and see if they contain any vulnerabilities. Now we've seen how we use ZenMap before, but I just want to convey the idea of anything is a computer, and we've seen before how the Metasploitable device, this device is actually a website. It has a web server running, so websites are nothing different than this. If you want to get an IP of a website, all you have to do is just do a ping. So for example, if we're targeting Facebook, so all we have to do is do ping facebook.com, and we'll get their IP right here. So we have Facebook's IP, and we'll be able to run ZenMap against it and get a list of all the running services on Facebook. Now, obviously, I'm not going to do that because I'm not allowed to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run ZenMap against this Metasploitable device, which basically is a computer device, and that's what we're interested into testing. Again, I can't really stress this anymore. Anything is a computer, whether it's a website, a server, any online service, a phone, anything is a computer. So you can go about penetration, anything the same way. So I'm going to run ZenMap just the same way that we did before. So I'm going to go on my activities. I'm just going to look for ZenMap. And here's ZenMap. And I'm going to put the IP of my target of the Metasploitable device, which was 10.14.04. So remember, in the network penetration testing part, we used to put the base IP and put it over 24 to cover all the IPs around us in the network. In this case, you might be testing a remote IP. So for example, in the Facebook case, all you have to do is just put the Facebook IP in there and test it. Now that's granted that you have permission to do that. Now I don't have permission, so I'm not going to do that. What I have permission to do is test my own device, which is installed on the same network as me. So that's why I'm putting that IP. But you can literally put any IP you want in there and test it. So I'm going to hit on scan. And this will give me a list of all the installed applications. Okay, so the scan is finished now. And we have a lot of open ports, a lot of services. What I advise you to do in this case now, if you want to do a simple test, is you literally go on ports, port by port, read what it is, and Google the name of the program. So for example, we have port 21 here. That's an FTP port. FTP is a service that it's installed to allow people to upload or download files from the remote server. So we can see usually FTP services use a username and a password, but you can see that this service has been misconfigured and it allows anonymous FTP login. So unlike the SSH that we used before in the network penetration testing, we used the default password. With this, you'll be able to log in without a password. So all you have to do is download an FTP client, such as FileZilla, and you'll be able to connect using this IP address on port 21. Now I'm not going to explain this because it's very simple. You literally download the application and connect to it. What else you can do is you can Google this. This is an FTP server. You can literally Google this and see if it has any issues, if it has any misconfigurations, if it has any known code execution exploits. So I know if you Google this now, this particular application has a backdoor installed with it. For now, I'd like to show you something simpler, just so that we make this shorter. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have a look on the 512. So let's assume we went on them one by one. We couldn't find anything, and we reached the 512 TCP port. So I'm going to copy this. This is the service that's running on this port. So literally, I don't know what's this. So I'm going to copy it, go on Google and Google it. Okay, so we're going to have a look on the first result that we got here. And we can see that this is a remote execution program. So that's very nice. That's very cool. So if we manage to log in with this, we'll be able to execute commands on the target computer. And it uses the RSH rlogin. That's a program that ships with Linux that allows you, similar to SSH, in a way that lets you execute remote commands on the target computer. So let's go back and see how we can connect to this. So I'm going to do rlogin. And again, I don't know how to use this app, so I'm going to do the help to see how to use it. And we can see that the format is rlogin. You put the options that you want. So what's important here is the username and the host, which is the target IP. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to do our login. We're going to put the username as root. Again, we said root is the user with the most privileges on the system. And we'll put the target IP, which is 10.20. Now, as you can see now, we are logged into the Metasploitable machine here. And if I do ID to get my ID, you can see that I am root. If I get where I am, pwd, I'm in the root directory, I can list stuff. If I do a uname, that'll list the host name and the kernel that's running on the machine. And as you can see that I am in the Metasploitable machine with the root access. So this was a manual way, a basic way of gaining access to the target computer only by a misconfiguration of an installed service. So the rlogin service was not configured properly. All we had to do is just Google what came with that port, and we managed to log in and gain full access to the target computer. Now again, the key point here is you do a Zenmap scan, and then you go on each port that you find, you Google that port, and you'd be looking for misconfigurations, default passwords, if this target service came in with a backdoor, or code execution. Maybe it just wasn't programmed properly, or it had a flaw that can be used to gain access to that computer. Now we'll have examples of these things in future videos as well. So far in the server-side attacks, we've seen how we can use a default password or use a misconfigured service to gain access to the target computer. Today we're going to have an example on a very simple thing, which is a backdoor. So some programs or services were shipped or come in with backdoors embedded in them. So we're going to exploit that today. And I chose this very simple exploit because I want to introduce you to a framework called Metasploit. We're going to be using that framework a lot, so I wanted something simple to start with, and then we're going to go deeper into that framework. Now first, let me show you how we find that exploit. So again, using the same method that we've always been using, I have my Nmap scan. And as I said, we're going to go on each port and Google them looking for exploits. So I'm going to Google the service name here. And I'm going to go to my browser, go to Google. And I'm going to type in exploit. So the service name and followed by exploit. And as you can see, the first result comes in from a website called Rapid7. Now, Rapid7 is a company that makes Metasploit framework. So that's why I chose this particular exploit to show you today. So let me go back and let's talk about Metasploit for a second. So we're going to exploit this service or this problem using Metasploit. And as you can see here, Rapid7 is telling us that this version of FTP has a backdoor command execution. So it allows us, we can basically execute commands on the target computer if it has this program installed. And from Nmap, we know that this program is installed, which means that we can execute commands on the target machine. So I'm coming back here and I'm going to go to the next slide, which talks about Metasploit. Now, Metasploit, as I said, is made by Rapid7. It is a huge framework that contains a large number of exploits. So it allows you to exploit vulnerabilities or create your own exploits. If you are an expert and you know how to discover and make exploits, then Metasploit will help you do that. Now, for today, we're doing a very simple use of an existing vulnerability. So the commands on Metasploit are very easy. They might seem a bit complicated now, but once you get used to it, it is very easy to use. And a lot of them are generic commands. So here I'm showing you the basic generic commands, and then there are other commands that you get used to them in time. So the first command is MSF console, and this basically just launches Metasploit program. You can always type in help at any stage and you'll get help of the commands and their description on how you can use them. You can use the show command to show something. So you can show the available exploits, you can show the available auxiliaries, the available payloads, and we'll talk about what each of these mean in the future. You can use the use command to use something that you've shown. So, for example, you showed exploits and you picked a certain exploit that you want to use. Then you use the use command and then you type in the exploit name to run it. Then you can use the set option or the set command to set specific options for the exploit. For example, if you wanted to set the IP address of your target, so you set the IP and then you put the value of the IP that you want to set it to. And then at the end, once you finish configuring your exploit, you can type in exploit to execute that exploit. Now, I know this might look a bit vague, but once I use it, it's going to become very clear to you. And we're going to be using these programs a lot, these commands a lot, so they're going to become very easy and simple to use. So we're coming back here. So we went on Nmap, we Googled the name of the service, and the first thing that came up is that this service has a backdoor command execution. Because this is on Rapid7, the vulnerability is exploitable using Metasploit. And the module name that we're going to be using is this. So it made our life much easier with this. So I'm going to copy the name. This is the name that I want to use to exploit this vulnerability. So I'm going to go to my console and I'm going to launch Metasploit using the command msf console. And we're going to do a use and then put the name of the exploit that we just copied from Google or from Rapid7. So we're going to use that certain exploit. And as you can see now, the name here changed to exploit and then the name of exploit that we're using. Then we're going to use the show command to show the options that we need to set. So as I said, show is a generic command that you can use it in a number of cases. So in this case, we're doing a show options to see all the options that we can change for this particular exploit. And as you can see now, the second option is the port that the service is running on, and it's already set to port 21. And this is correct. If we go back to Nmap, you'll see that our target FTP client or server is running on port 21. So this is good. We don't need to change any of that. What we need to change is the rhost. So the rhost is the target IP address, as you can see here. And to change the value of this, as I explained before, we're going to use the set option or the set command. So our command is going to be set, and we're going to set the rhost, and that's the IP address of my target Metasploitable machine. So we use set, and after set, you put the option name. So for example, if you wanted to change the port, you set rport. We are changing the host, so we set rhost to 10.20.14.204, and I'm going to hit enter. And as you can see now, this is the rhost is set to this. Now what I want to do is show the options again, just to make sure that everything is configured correctly. And as you can see now, the rhost has been changed to 10.20.14.204. So everything is ready now, and to execute the exploit, we just type in exploit. So it seems like the exploit ran, but nothing has happened. We didn't gain anything. So what I'm going to do is just run it again, and this happens sometimes. And as you can see now, the exploit was run successfully. And now I have access to the target computer. If I do an ID, you'll see that my ID is root. Now basically I'm running Linux commands here. So if you do a uname a, you'll see that this is my Metasploitable machine. And if I do ls, then it'll list the files for me. If I do pwd, it'll show me where I am. And I can use Linux commands to do anything I want on the target machine. Now this was a very simple use of Metasploit. In the future, we're going to be using it for more advanced stuff. So far, we've seen how we can use a service with a default password, or a service that has not been configured correctly, or a service that came with a backdoor to gain full access to the target computer. We also seen how the basic use of Metasploit using to connect to a backdoor that was installed on the FTP service. Today we're going to have a more advanced look on Metasploit, and we'll see how we use it to run a vulnerability that exists in a certain service. It's a code execution vulnerability, which will give us full access to the target computer as well. So back to our results here with Nmap, and we're going to do the same thing that we've been doing for a while. We copy the service name and see if it has any vulnerabilities. So for today, we're having a look on this particular port 139, which has a Samba server version 3.x. So 3 point anything really. So we're going to go to Google just like we did in the previous videos, and we're going to look for Samba 3x exploit. Now, as you can see, there's a number of results. The one that we're interested in, the ones that come in from Rapid7, because as I said, these are the people that make Metasploit. So the exploits that you see there can be used through Metasploit. So we have two examples here. Now, I've actually tried both. The first one doesn't work, so there is a bit of trial and error in this. And the second one is the user map script. It's a command execution vulnerability, as you can see here. So the name of the vulnerability is this. So it's the same thing that we used before with the evil backdoor in the FTP service. This is just a different name that we're going to use. So I'm going to go to Metasploit, and I've already run MSF console. So you can see that the console is running here for me. So I'm going to do a use like we did before yesterday. And then I'm going to put the name of the exploit that I want to use. Then the next thing that we usually do is show options like we did yesterday. So I'm going to do show options. So using these exploits is always pretty much the same. The only difference is the options that you can set for each exploit. So you always do use and then you put the exploit name, and then you do a show options to see what you can change to work with this exploit. So in the future, you probably will get different exploits than what I have. So every time you want to run an exploit, you do a use exploit name, and then you do show options to see the options that you want to configure. But using the exploits and setting the options and running them is always the same. So I'm showing you a few examples that should cover pretty much everything that you want to do in the future. So again, we need to set up the rhost, which is the IP of the target computer. And we're going to do it the same way that we did before. As I said, it's setting the options is always the same. So we're going to do set rhost, and then we're going to put the IP of the target computer, which is 10.20.14.204. So exactly like we did before, we're using the set to set an option, which is the rhost. So we're going to do a show options. And as you can see now, the rhost has been set correctly. What we need to do now is, here is where things differ from the previous lecture. In the previous lecture, we used a backdoor that was already installed on the target computer. So all we had to do is connect to the backdoor, and then we could run any commands, any Linux commands on the target computer. In today's video, the target computer does not have a backdoor. It has a normal program that has a buffer overflow or a code execution vulnerability. So the program doesn't have any code that allow us to run Linux commands. It has a certain flaw that will let us run a small piece of code. These small pieces of code are called payloads. So what we need to do, we need to create a payload and then run it on the target computer using the vulnerability that we found. That piece of code will allow us to do different things. So the payload is what allows us to do things that are useful to us. Now the payload might let us do Linux commands, and there is other type of payloads we'll look at in the future. So to see the payloads that you can use with this particular exploit, all you have to do is run show payloads. And these are the different type of payloads that you can use. Now I'm going to talk about this again. So payloads are small pieces of code that will be executed on the target computer once the vulnerability has been exploited. So when we exploit the vulnerability, the code that we're going to pick here will be executed. And depending on the type of payload we choose, that payload will do something that is useful to us. So right now you can see that all the payloads are CMD. So that's short for command. So they let you run commands on the target computer, just like Linux commands. And all of them only run on Unix, and that's okay because our target is Linux. And there is two main types. There is bind payloads and there is reverse payloads. The bind payloads, all they do is they open a port on the target computer, and then we connect to that port. The reverse, they do the opposite. So they open a port in my machine, and then they connect from the target computer to my machine. This is useful because the reverse allows us to bypass firewalls. So the firewall will filter any connections going to the target machine. But if the target machine connects to me and I don't have a firewall, then I'll be able to bypass the firewall. So I'm going to use the CMD Unix reverse, or actually I'll use the CMD Unix reverse netcat. The last parts of these payloads are the programming language or the tool that's going to be used to facilitate the connection. So for example, you can see there's payloads written in Perl, in Ruby, or in Python, PHP, or using Netcat, which is a tool that allows connections between computers. So this is the one that I'm going to use. And I'm going to use it the same way you use an exploit. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to use it using the set command. So the same way you set an option, we're going to set payload, so just like an option, to the payload name that we just picked. Now I'm going to do a show options to see if there is any other options that I need to set. And yes, because we picked a payload now, there is more options. So there is an option called lhost, and it's the listening address, which is my own address. So I'm going to get my own IP address using ifconfig. And my own address is 10.20.14.203. So I'm going to close this. And I'm going to set the lhost. So it's like the same way that we set the rhost before. We set the lhost to 10.20. So before we used to do set rhost to set this option. Now we're setting the lhost to set this particular option. So set is really simple. Set, you put the option name and then the value that you want to set it to. Then I'm going to do show options. And now everything seems fine. So we're using this exploit. The rhost is set to this, which is okay. And then the lhost is set to this, which is perfect. And then you can also set the port that you're going to be listening on your current computer. You can actually set it to 80 if you wanted to. That's the port that is used by web browsers. So if you set the L port to 80, the target computer will try to connect to you using port 80, which is never filtered on firewalls because that's the port that web browsers or web servers use. So whenever you access a website, you actually access port 80 on that website. So if you open port 80 on your machine and the target connects to you on 80, then the firewall will think that the target is only browsing the internet. I'm not going to do that now because I have a web server running on port 80 and that will conflict. So I'm just going to set the L port to 555, just for example for you, just to see that you can change any option using the same way, which is set, the option name, and then the value. So I'm going to do show options again. And as you can see, this has been changed to 5555. And I'm going to do exploit to run the exploit. Now, as you can see, it's telling me that session 1 has been opened and the connection is between this device and this device, which is the target and my device. So I'm going to do a PWD or I do an ID. You'll see that I'm root. If I do a uname A, you'll see I'm in the Metasploitable machine. And if I do an ls, I'll be able to list the files and so on. I can use any Linux command just like we did before in the other videos. In this lecture, we're going to talk about a really cool tool called Nexpose. This is more of an enterprise tool that is designed to be used in large companies and organizations. It's basically a vulnerability management framework made by Rapid7, so the same people that made Metasploit. It comes with a really nice web GUI, and what I mean by a vulnerability management framework is that it's designed to cover the whole life cycle of vulnerability management. So it can scan for open ports, it can discover running services, find vulnerabilities in these services, find exploits, whether you can exploit them in Metasploit or if there is a different way of exploiting them, give you the resources to do that, verify that these exploits exist, and even generate reports to detail everything that it discovers. It actually generates 2 sets of reports, a technical one for the technical people and a high-level report to share with less technical people, such as admins and managers. You can also use it to automate these scans so that you can run specific scans that you configure yourself every certain period of time. So as you can see, a really cool framework with a lot of really useful features, but most of them would only be useful to big enterprises and companies, especially considering the price and the resources this program requires. So it's very resource hungry. It needs a minimum of 8 gigs of memory and a lot of storage. But don't worry about that because we're only going to use this in one lecture, the next lecture, just to show you what to expect in an enterprise environment where you'd be running such tools. And that's why you actually don't need to worry about the resources, because if you ever needed to use this type of software, the company that you're working with will provide it and will provide the needed infrastructure. So if you can give Kali 8 gigs of memory, then go for it and test it as I'm going to show you in the next lecture. If you can't, then that's fine. Just watch the lecture and you're going to get a good idea on how to operate these kind of tools. So first of all, you're going to need to download Nexpose. It's not installed in Kali. There is a link for it in the resources of this lecture. Make sure that you use a company email. If you don't have one, use the link in the resources as well to get an email that looks like a company email, because they're going to send you a verification code to that. Once you have it downloaded, I have it right here already in my downloads. I'm going to navigate to my download directory from my terminal. So we're going to do cd downloads. We're going to do ls and we can find it in here. This is the installation script. Now, before we run this, this is a binary executable. We're going to have to change its permissions to an executable. And to do that, we're going to do chmod plus x followed by the file name. Now, if we do ls, you'll see it's going to be listed in green, which means that it is an executable. And therefore, we'll be able to run it by doing / followed by the file name. We're going to hit enter. And this will show us a really easy to use installation wizard. So we're going to click on next. We're going to keep this at the first option to install the console and the scan engine. You can modify the installation directory in here, but we're going to keep it to the default. We're going to hit next. Now it's given us a warning, as you can see, saying that 80 gigabytes of storage is recommended. This is not necessary. It's simply saying that you could use a lot of storage if you continue using the program. But for testing purposes, what I have right now, 56, is more than enough. So we're going to continue. And this is just a checklist to make sure that you're meeting the minimum requirements. The main one is the amount of memory I assigned to Kali. As you can see, it has 10 gigabytes of memory because, like I said, the minimum is 8. We're going to click on next. And we're just going to fill this with my information. So I'm going to put my first name, my last name, company name. We're going to set a username. We'll just set it to Zaid and we'll put a password. And we're going to click on next. Now it's just giving you a summary of everything that we set so far. The main thing you want to make sure you do is to uncheck this box so it's already unchecked. If you check it, the program will automatically start after you finish the installation. But like I said, it's a really huge framework and I'd rather start it manually, and I'll show you how to do that later on. So we want to make sure that we do not check this box. We're going to click on next and it's going to start installing this framework for us. So I'm going to pause the video and resume once it's installed. Perfect. Now the installation is complete. The only thing that I want to modify right now is, as you can see in here, it's saying that the console is configured to automatically run at startup. I do not want this to happen because, like I said, we're only going to use this in one lecture. Therefore, there is no point of this software starting every time we start our Kali Linux. So I'm going to click on finish. And what I'm going to do now is disable the auto start of this program of Nexpose. So to do that, we're going to do systemctl disable, and we're going to follow this by the name of the service that we want to disable. And as mentioned in the previous message that we got from the installer, the name of the service is Nexpose console.service. We're going to hit enter. And as you can see, it's saying that it removed it from the auto start. So now if we reboot our Kali and restart it, the Nexpose console will not be automatically started, which is exactly what we want. So now that we installed Nexpose, let's see how we're going to start it. So I'm going to clear the screen, and starting it is actually very, very simple. First, we're going to navigate to the location where we installed Nexpose. So as we've seen during the installation wizard, this is installed in OPT, Rapid7, Nexpose. Now we're going to list the directories in here, and the startup script is stored in this directory. So we're going to navigate to it as well. So we're going to do cd nsc. And if we list all of the files and directories in here, you'll notice that we have a file called nsc.sh. This is the start script for Nexpose. So I'm going to maximize my terminal, and we're going to do // followed by the name of the script that we want to start, which is nsc.sh. And we're going to hit enter. Now, if you read the wizard, it actually said that starting Nexpose could take up to 30 minutes. And in my case, sometimes in other older computers, it took up to 40 minutes to actually initialize this framework. So you want to be very patient with this, let it run, and you want to make sure you have 10 gigs of memory, like I said, and you will know when it's done because you're going to get the URL that you can use to access it. So I'm going to pause it and we'll resume once it's fully initialized. Perfect. Now, because we don't see any errors and because we see this message telling us that we can actually access Nexpose through this URL, that means everything has started successfully. So we can actually just control and click it to open it in our browser. And as you can see, you're going to get a warning because you're loading this over HTTPS and Nexpose is using a self-signed certificate. So all you have to do is click on advanced and accept the risk because this is running on our own server, so we know this is fine. And as you can see now, we're getting the login screen. So I'm going to log in using the same information that I used when I installed Nexpose. So my username was Zaid and the password is what I set it to. Gonna hit enter. And perfect, as you can see, we got the console. Now the first thing it's asking me for is the activation key. You should receive one on your email in your inbox by now. I already have it and I already have it copied in my clipboard. So I'm just gonna paste it here and click on activate key. Give it some time to activate the key. It actually could take a few minutes again. Now perfect, as you can see, it's saying activation successful. So we're going to click on OK. And that's it. Now the framework is ready to be used. And I'm going to show you how to use it exactly in the next lecture. But like I said, that would be the only lecture that we're going to be using this framework. I'm only showing you how to use it now just to give you an idea of this type of software. But if you can't install it on your computer, that's completely fine because we're not going to be relying on it in the rest of the course. Okay, now that we installed Nexpose successfully, let's see how we can run that tool and see what that tool is. I know we spoke about it a lot and we went through the installation process, but you still haven't seen what the tool does. So this is the home page of the tool. And as you can see now, everything is empty. So before I start talking about what everything means, let's go ahead and add a target and then we'll do a test and we'll see because this stuff will be filled after we do a test. So the first thing I'm going to do is go on create and go on a site to add a target. And I'm going to call this target Metasploitable. And I'm going to go to the assets. And we're going to add the target. So the target can be arranged the same way we added it when we were doing the network penetration things with ZenMap. So you can add a range or you can add a specific IP. So in this, we're actually targeting the Metasploitable machine. So we're going to add our target, which is 10, 20, 10.20.14.204. Confirm this here. This is our Metasploitable machine, 10.20.14.204. And we're going to add this to a group, and we call that Metasploitable as well. Or we'll call this test. So this is our group name. Now, in here in the authentication part, if the target uses some sort of authentication, so nobody can access the target unless they need to authenticate with some sort of a service. For example, if it's an FTP service or a web HTTP authentication, a telnet, or an SQL server. So you can pick it from here, put the domain, username, password, confirm your password, and that way the framework will be able to authenticate with that service and test the security of your server. Now, our server doesn't use any type of authentication, so we don't need this. Also, if you're targeting a web application and the web application has a login page, for example, for users, for example, Facebook, let's say you're targeting Facebook, then you won't have access to most of Facebook's features unless you log in with using a certain username and a password. So again, using this feature here, you can log in and then test the security of your target. And the templates is where you select the scan type. So it's very similar to the scan type with ZenMap. We've seen in ZenMap we had a quick scan plus, and intense scan. This is the same. So each one of these profiles is different. It scans different things. For example, we have the full audit here, which takes a lot of time, but pretty much checks for everything. Then you have a full audit, enhanced logging without Web Spider. So a Web Spider is a tool or a script that finds all the files and directories in your target. And the default one is a full audit without Web Spider, so that's the one we're going to be doing. And you also have network specific profiles, you have web audits as well. So I really encourage you to try all of them or most of them and get yourself familiar with them. Now we're only going to try this one because using them is the same, which will be scanning for ICMP, TCP, and UDP ports. So I'm leaving that the same. I'm going to leave the engine the same as well, which means it's going to use our local engine, which we installed, instead of using the one that is provided by Rapid7. In the alerts, you can set up custom alerts so that when a vulnerability is found, you get a notification. And the schedule is a really, really cool feature. Now, say you're working for a company or for an enterprise that keeps pushing new code every day. Or, for example, maybe your code, you do a test today and everything you're working on is good. Your web servers, your programs, your applications, everything is up to date and there's no vulnerabilities in them. Let's say tomorrow you push a new vulnerable code, or maybe tomorrow someone discovers a new vulnerability with a program that you're using on your web server. So you're not secure anymore. So this feature allows you to schedule this test so that it runs every week or every hour or every month, depending on how critical it is. So all you have to do is just go in to create a schedule and create the schedule. So you can put a start date and an end date. And you set up the frequency from here for every day, every Thursday, every 26th, or depending on what you want really. You create that schedule, and then every interval that you specify, the scan will run. And even you can get it to produce a report for you, so you can go over the report and see what's changed or what has been discovered. So everything's good now. The most important part today, or what we did here, is you put your target here. And the next thing is you select the template. So we have both of them selected, and we're going to do save and scan, which will save this configuration and start a scan for us. Now, as you can see, our asset discovery is in progress. I'm going to pause the video, and after that, we will talk about the results that we got. Okay, so my scan is over, and I'm here now at the assets page. And as you can see that we have one asset has been scanned. We can see that the asset is running Ubuntu, and the skills that you need to hack into this asset is Novice. Now already from this you can see that Nexpose show us much more information than Metasploit Community, and it's a much more advanced vulnerability management framework. We can see that we scanned one target, it's Metasploitable, and the site is global. Let me zoom in. It's running on Ubuntu Linux 8.08.04. We discovered no malware, and 177 exploits, 308 vulnerabilities. Remember, with Metasploit Community, I think we only discovered 8, only one exploitable vulnerability and 8 modules that can be used. Here we discovered 308 vulnerabilities, so we discovered so many more vulnerabilities and exploits. You can see that there's a risk factor assessed to this, and the last time that the scan was done. Now, if we go down, we can see that the operating system that we discovered, again, it's Metasploit. We can see the software that is installed on the target computer. So not only the services that's running on ports, we can see actual software installed on the target computer. This can be very useful after we hack the computer. So after we manage to hack into it, it's very useful to find local exploits that can be used to increase our privileges. For example, if you got a normal user and you want it to become a root, then you can use a local buffer overflow to increase your privileges or to do other kind of stuff. So these are very useful in terms of post-exploitation. If we go down, we'll see the services that's installed on the target computer, just like Nmap gave it to us. We can see that HTTP is running, DNS, and so on. If you click on any of these services, you'll see that it'll give you more information about it. For example, it's a HTTP service, a description about it, and the ports that it's running on. So we can see that HTTP is running on port 80 and on port 8180. Now let's go up, and if we wanted to have a closer look on the vulnerabilities, we can go to the vulnerabilities page here, and you can see we have a graph here about the vulnerabilities categorized based on their risk factor, and here they're categorized based on the skill level needed in order to exploit these vulnerabilities. And in here, you can see a list of all of them, and we can switch between them using this right here. Again, this, if there's any malware, you'll see it in here. And if there is an exploitation, you'll see it in here. Now, all of the top vulnerabilities here don't have an exploitation using a tool, but they are ordered based on their risk. So these are very risky vulnerabilities. And then as we proceed through them, the risk will be a bit less. So you can see here, it discovered that VNC password is password. So we can go in and try to connect using VNC. Now, VNC is a service very similar to remote desktop. Basically, it will show you the desktop, and it'll allow you to gain full access to the target computer, just like remote desktop. I'm not going to show you how to do that. Very simple. But it's telling you here the password is password. Now, it's also telling you that there is a backdoor running, and we use that already. It's telling us that it's running an old version of PHP that can be exploitable. Just an old version, actually. Now let's look at something that can be exploitable. So I'm gonna click on this to order them by the exploit, and you can see that all of these have an M logo, which means that they can be exploited using Metasploit. You can see here we have the remote shell service that we use, and there is the rlogin service here that can be used as well that we already had a look on. So let's click on something that we haven't seen before. And here you can see a description of this vulnerability. Again, you can see the port that it's running on, and you can see why it thinks that this particular target is vulnerable to this exploit. If you go down, it will show you how you can exploit it. So there's 3 different modules that can be used to exploit it. It doesn't really have to exploit it. Sometimes you just see modules that can be used to verify the existence of this exploit. But basically, these are modules associated with it. And if we click on this, it'll take us to the Rapid7 page that we always used to see when we Google stuff. and we see the module name, or we can just copy and paste it in Metasploit and show the options and then use this exploit the same way that we've seen it in previous videos. Again, when you go down, you'll see references to this particular exploit. And at the bottom, it will show you the solution on how you can fix this exploit. So for this one, all you need to do is just change the administrator password and not use the default configuration. Another useful thing is the reports. So this framework allows you to generate reports for each scan that you do. And there is different types of templates for the report. So if you go on create report, you can see that there is an audit report that contains a lot of information, detailed information for the programmers or for the technical people. Or you can use an executive report, which has less information, and it's made for the managers or for the top level people that don't have much experience with technical stuff. You can select any template you want, call it anything. So I'm going to call this Metasploitable or Metasploit. And you select the format that you want. So it's set to PDF here. Then I'm going to select the target scan that I want to generate a report for. And I selected my Metasploitable. And then you save and run the report to generate the report. You can also get this to generate reports automatically every time, because as I showed you, you can schedule reports, you can schedule scans, and you can also schedule an automatic report after each time a scan is done. So for example, if you're scanning every week, you can also generate a report every week, every time that scan is done. Now let me just download the report and show you what it looks like. As you can see, it has the date, it has the title, it has all the exploits that have been found, but this is the executive report, so it has small details about the exploits and more graphical stuff to show the executives the risks that has been found and how critical they are. So as you can see, Nexpose shows you much more detail and it's much more advanced. It's directed towards bigger companies, bigger infrastructures where you need to always make sure everything is up to date and everything is installed and does not have any exploits. In the previous lectures, we learned the basic methodology of server-side attacks. So we learned the basic methodology of how to test the security of servers. We learned how to do that manually, and then we learned how to do it with Nexpose using tools. So before moving to the next section, which is the client-side attacks, I want to spend one more lecture just reflecting over everything that we've done so far and just going over the steps that we used in order to discover and exploit vulnerabilities in servers. Because testing the security of servers or running server-side attacks is more or less always the same. Let me show you what I mean. So we're always going to have to start by discovering information about our target. And we're going to do that by discovering the open ports and the running services. And we're going to do that using Nmap, as we shown earlier. Then, once we have a list of all of these servers and the running services, as we can see in here, for each one of these entries, so for each one of these ports and for each one of these services, we're going to go ahead and search for vulnerabilities. And we're going to do that using Google and using websites such as ExploitDB and so on. We're going to look for vulnerabilities in these services. If we do find vulnerabilities, we're going to see if they are exploitable, because sometimes the exploitation might not be public. And if it is, we're going to try to exploit it or verify this vulnerability. And once done, we're going to write a note of it in our report, and we will talk about pen test reports at the end of the course. So as you can see, the steps are always the same. You're always going to use Nmap to discover the open ports and the running services. You're always going to look for vulnerabilities in each one of these services using Google or other vulnerability websites like ExploitDB. The only difference is going to be finding and verifying these exploits, because using them could be slightly different as we've seen previously, and A lot of the time when you find vulnerabilities that are not available in Metasploit and so on, the exploit itself will include documentation on how to use it, and if you can find it, again, you can look for it on Google and learn how to exploit it. So although it looks very simple, this is really always going to be the methodology that we use when approaching server-side attacks. And this will always be the basic steps you'll use in CTFs such as Hack the Box and Try Hack Me. You'll always start with an Nmap scan. You're always going to try to discover vulnerabilities, search for them, try to exploit them, and verify your findings. So although it sounds very simple, I just wanted to make one more lecture just so that you know and so that it's clear that it's really as simple as this, and the only things that could be different are the exploits themselves, which you might have to do a bit of research to learn how to exploit them, but there is no way for me to cover all possible exploits. There's literally thousands and thousands of exploits. What I'm trying to do here is just teach you how to actually search for exploits and exploit them yourself, or search for information and apply it yourself, and give you the basic proper methodology of how to approach server-side attacks. Now, if you go throughout the whole list of the ports and services that you discovered and you could not discover any exploitable vulnerabilities, then the only hope for you is to actually try client-side attacks. And this is what we're going to cover in the next section.